At the same time, Trump's trial kicks off today, and there were some very dramatic occurrings, I guess, that happened on Friday when a man actually self-immolated outside of the courthouse. It was actually caught live. We're not going to show you images of the self-immolation itself, but there were some reporters on the scene, and this is what it was described like by them. Let's take a listen.
What do you say? We also are seeing an active shooter. An active shooter is in the park outside the court. We have seen an arm that has been visible, that has been engulfed in total flames. There is chaos that is happening. People are wondering right now if people are in danger. I'm looking across the courtyard. There is a man racing to his aid. There is coats coming off to try to put out the fire. We have members of security details. NYPD is rushing to the scene. They are trying to come out. Officers are on the scene. A fire extinguisher is right now present, being put on this man to try to put out. People are climbing over barricades to try to separate the public, to put out the flame on this man. He has lit himself out in fire.
That was the initial reaction. Obviously, it was not an active shooter. It was a protester. He's put out a manifesto, etc. It appears to be a sad and horrible case of mental illness. It's often people, schizophrenia and others attracted to certain scenarios like this. He wanted to start, quote unquote, a revolution and decided to self-immolate himself outside of the trial. But anything you want to say on that, Krystal, before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add, he did ultimately succumb to his wounds from the self-immolation. The reporting on him is that he had been prone to some sort of fringe or conspiratorial beliefs, and then his mother passed. And according to the people who were around him, that was really sort of a breaking point. So there was, immediate speculation. Oh, is this about he's protesting Trump's, legal issues or whatever? It appears to have had nothing to do with Trump, Peter Thiel, crypto, Jeffrey Epstein. A lot of things were mentioned in the Substack, but Trump was not central to it. So it appears to have been an incredibly tragic instance of mental illness.
Yes, it was tragic, trying to get attention, etc. But, of course, that does not obscure the fact that there is that trial that is happening today, significant. And let's actually go through some of it. The entire jury has been seated for the trial. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. New York Times says, will a mountain of evidence be enough to convict Trump? We're going to have the opening statements today in the people of the state of New York versus Donald J. Trump. And the case, quote, seems strong, but a conviction is far from assured. Some of the witnesses are actually very important here. One of them is David Pecker, who some of you might remember from the Stormy Daniels days. David Pecker was the, quote, tabloid publisher who had buried the damaging stories about Trump, the so-called pay-for-play scheme where catch and kill, where they would buy incriminating stories on behalf of Trump and then keep them in the vault under an NDA before then reporting it. Other witnesses in the case will include Hope Hicks, the spokesperson who tried to spin around this, a witness again for the prosecution, and then, of course, Michael Cohen, who has already pled guilty and actually served time in prison specifically around this charge, but on the federal charge, which Trump was never indicted for. So 3 of those witnesses very likely to back up the state's case. In terms of will it be enough to convict him, conviction is going to go on whether they agree with this novel interpretation of the case and in terms of the law, in terms of statute of limitations, but also in terms of how they view the central charge around whether it was campaign finance fraud or whether it was a personal one or not. And this is, of course, Krystal, been from the beginning around this case, why eventually the feds decided not to charge Trump with said charge around this, because they thought they could plausibly not argue, at least in a jury, to convict Trump on the campaign finance fees in particular, which amounts to accounting fraud in terms of why the state is involved.
Yeah, so just as a reminder, there won't be cameras in the courtroom, so this all be, after the day's events are concluded, we'll kind of get a synopsis of whatever was said, who testified, what happened, what was said in the opening arguments, etc. It is noteworthy that you got David Pecker and Hope Hicks, who are testifying, so they won't have to wholly rely on the testimony of Michael Cohen, who is, convicted liar, so he's not the most reliable witness. And that is one of the things that the Trump team are certainly going to, pursue and talk about, is there's this one key moment where Cohen claims that he and Trump were in dialogue in the White House and Trump was talking about these payments, because this is one of the things that they'll try to claim is, like, basically he had no idea that any of this was going on. So it'll be interesting not only to see how that, that direct, like he said piece plays out. But what additional information Hope Hicks, who was, for those of you who don't recall, who was omnipresent, who was in a lot of key meetings, who had a lot of time with Trump, and also a long history with him, even predating, her time in the White House. And David Pecker. Now, Pecker, who was the tabloid publisher, National Enquirer, and also had a long history with Trump, he is able to testify not just to this Stormy Daniels hush money situation, but to a couple other stories that he helped Trump to quote unquote catch and kill. So the idea being there was another, this Playboy model, Susan McDougal, who claimed she had an affair with Trump. He purchased her story and then didn't run it. The other one was this doorman at the Trump Tower building who claimed, this is apparently not true, but who had claimed that Trump had a mistress and the mistress had had an abortion. Pecker had also purchased and buried that story as well. Now, with Stormy Daniels, he didn't do that because she was asking for too much money. But then he works, this is all the allegations, right? And the Trump's team, they'll have their say. But he works with Michael Cohen to figure out this workaround to get this story hushed up, even though the price was too steep for him to be able to do with the National Enquirer. So that's sort of like the heart of this. On the one hand, in terms of the jury, it's Manhattan, not a lot of Trump love in Manhattan. On the other hand, you had a couple of these jurors who were ultimately selected who said at least a few sort of like more or less favorable things about Trump, who weren't just out and out Trump haters. And, he only has to get one person.
Just one. Right.
On his side to prevail here in what would be a very, very significant win. So those are kind of the contours of the case as best as I can see.
Or can you imagine if it's a hung jury or if he wins?
Oh, I think that's very possible.
Oh, I think too. But the media freak out on that is going to be unbelievable. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen because there was some discussion previously about the jurors. 2 jurors were actually dismissed in a trial before they eventually, all 12, were seated. It appears that some of the jurors were dismissed, prospective jurors, because of critical social media posts about Trump. But the 18 people who have selected have decided and have said that they will decide the case based, quote, purely on the facts. Some of them, 2 of them actually, expressed positive feelings about the former president that are on the jury. 2 of those who were dismissed. One, there was a lot of attention around this, which we previously had, where a juror with profile was described by Fox News and by other media outlets, and she was approached and she was like, people were asking whether it was her who was on the jury, and she asked to be taken off. And other jurors as well had expressed some feelings around that. It was just funny though, Krystal, because Fox and Jesse Waters in particular was getting the blame. But if you went and you looked, like, you could basically, if you know these people, you could guess it, because ABC, the New York Times, and others had written similar write-ups of all of the jurors who were involved. I will say, I don't know how I feel about that in terms of reporting another, because I'm like, okay, well, if we're not going to release their names, but just like for me, it's like, well, an Indian guy who wears glasses, who does a YouTube show. It's like, oh, I wonder who it is. Former White House correspondent. It's like either keep it secret or don't, but don't try and play this weird middle ground where we are right now.
True. Yeah, I think you could have released, like they had in there, what their news preferences were, which I thought was interesting. Yeah. The comments they made about Trump and how they felt about him, that was interesting. But yeah, you probably didn't need like if they're a nurse. How is that really?
Well, I don't blame the media.
Or maybe even like the top line, like, okay, it's a female, fine. But drilling down into a lot of those details.
So, I will say this, I don't blame the media. I think if the law is going to allow all of this to be published, then fine. I don't actually blame them at all. At the end of the day, it's up to the court to keep whatever its people safe or not. But if the court is going to have rules like secrecy and all that, then they should at least write them in a way that makes sense. I will never blame reporters or journalists from putting out a fulsome amount of information, because I think that's what they should do.
Although I will say, in the instance of Jesse Waters, and there was a whole right-wing conspiracy that these were like intentional, like lib activists who were sneaking onto the jury, which I think there is no evidence to support that in particular. But I feel bad for these jurors. Like, whether they're public now or not, like, it's very likely to come out who these individuals are. They're going to be at the center of a firestorm, the likes of which they probably can't even imagine, that few people really could imagine. It's going to be an absolute circus. And Yeah, we'll see how it all unfolds. We have one more piece that I'll let you queue up, but I just do want to say on the political note, I know we're so used to thinking nothing matters for Trump. These are old allegations, as you say, it's all baked in, and I think those are all like totally fair and legitimate points. But you do see his poll numbers right now slipping a bit. You see Biden now in a lot of national averages has claimed like a 1-point lead. His approval ratings ticked up a little tiny bit. How people are saying they feel about him on the issues versus Trump. He's doing a little bit better. And I do think part of what is dragging Trump down right now is just him being in the media now and it being in the context of legal troubles such as this case. And we also should remember when the first details of this emerged, like people really found it pretty gross. Even ones who said, it may not be illegal, but it's certainly wrong. So having those details day after day in the news, I think that there's some cope on the Trump right of saying like, oh, this persecution is going to guarantee him the elections. I think that's crazy. Like most of the country does not view these things the way that the Republican base does. I don't think there's any doubt that the criminal prosecutions helped him in the context of a Republican primary. In the context of a general election, it's a whole different ballgame. So maybe it's net neutral. Maybe it doesn't change anything, but I do not think that this is going to be a net win for Donald Trump the way that some of his supporters claim that it will be.
Yeah, I don't think it will be. I think it will be a win for him amongst his base. I think any prosecution. On terms of the public, I think this one basically nets out, and I think the others could be a lot more significant. Nonetheless, you know why it's most important is because the judge literally is threatening to throw him in jail if he's not there, in person. But we'll see whether any of that even materializes. We would be remiss if we didn't play some liberal fan fiction, which has been making the rounds about, what is it, Diaper Don? Is that the conspiracy?
That's right.
That's what they are claiming. So Midas Touch, which was it's that liberal organization that put out all those clips of Joe Rogan. They have reporters, sources, according to them, who are inside the courtroom who claim that Trump's flatulence is out of control inside the court, according to their well-placed individuals. Let's take a listen.
And I'm hearing from credible sources who know what's going on in the courtroom. And what I'm hearing is that, take it for what it's worth, but that Donald Trump is actually farting in the courtroom and that it's very stinky around him. It's a putrid odor in the courtroom and that Trump's lawyers are like repulsed by the scent and the smell. And I'm not just saying that to be like, oh, funny. I'm actually, we have good sources there. And I'm hearing it from actual credible people that as he's kind of falling asleep, he is actually passing gas. And that his lawyers are really struggling with the smell.
His lawyers are really struggling with the smell. These are credible reports.
I love this
sources.
Conspiracy personally.
Yeah. So this is also, and look, we're not cherry picking. That clip, when I saw, had somewhere around 9 million views on Twitter and had been retweeted some 11 to 12,000 times, and of course, like made the rounds across these like Occupy Republicans or all these like Facebook boomer pages. So the boomers are eating this one up. They are really enjoying the idea of flatulent Don or Diaper Don.
Yeah, I support this resistance lib conspiracy personally.
I mean, it is relatively harmless. It's fun. It is amusing, I'll tell you that. But yeah, this is what is capturing the minds, and there will only be even more of this type of fan fiction that make the rounds some more that he finds himself.
We don't know it's not true.
That's true.
We can't prove it's not true.
It is.
He's got credible sources in the courtroom.
It is unfalsifiable.
Who am I to deny that?
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.